I'm going to be reacting to this video where someone has 100%ed Slug It Out, a game that I worked on as a programmer many years ago. And it popped up on my recommended feed and was like, okay, let's look at it, I guess. Why not?
Slugterra, a very popular yet underrated cartoon about shooting superpowered slugs out of blasters and battling other people, released back on September 3rd, 2012. And quickly after, in December of that same year, a game was released on mobile named Slugterra Slug It Out, taking heavy.
Yeah. And we were working on it before it came out. I remember having pizza parties to see roughs. We'd go into one of our meeting rooms, and there'd be like a bunch of pizzas there, and then you can stay and watch some of the animatics of one of the episodes coming around. And it became kind of an ongoing joke because it'd be like the same one, I think like 3 times in a row. It's like, oh, we're going to see this one again. It's the ones like the ghost type guys. I can't remember what it's called, but like they were in like an abandoned mine, and there was like these ghosty type characters in there as well. But yeah, so it's like when we started working on Slug It Out, Slugterra was still being worked on.
Inspiration in the tile matching concept from a very popular game that was released earlier that year named Candy Crush, but instead put its own.
Not Candy Crush. If there was any inspiration, it would have been like Bejeweled. um, the inspiration was, I mean, the game from when we started prototyping it was quite different than what we ended up with. And that was primarily because when we first started prototyping it, we thought it was going to be an iPad only game. But then at some point, it was switched to no, it has to run on like the iPhone as well, which was different screen size. And this was the time where like there was like the iPad 1 and 2, and then the phones went from like people using the 3GS to I think the 5 just came out or was about to come out. I don't remember the exact timeline there, but yeah, so it changed a few times, but we landed on something that's a bit more like I think it's called Puzzle Fighter. Was probably closer, or even like Puzzle Quest, but not. We're not going to give Candy Crush any of its flowers. That was not one of them.
Own spin on it, where the player matches different tiles, in return powering up the slugs on their team and shooting their slugs at the opponent who is doing the exact same thing. And sadly, after 12.
Yeah, and just to touch on that quickly, yeah, it's like some of the games I had mentioned did stuff like that, but it was very turn-based. Like you would, those game loops would be like you'd be charging up stuff. I think like Puzzle Quest was that way. And I think there was probably a couple other games out there that was doing a similar thing. So you're charging up your abilities by matching tiles, but it was turn-based where we decided to go real time to add like a bit more panic to it. I remember we had like prototyped a handful of different ways of matching, which is a silly idea, but like we had like the idea of swapping like in a circle, a way of doing it, or you draw a line and it would flip the whole line. But then we ended up with like the simple just one spot to one spot, and made it so you could do it even if it didn't make a match. So then you could move a tile to where you want it if you're really fast. We were really going for like some sort of panic-inducing style of gameplay where you're just matching a bunch and then hitting stuff on the side. And then the big thing that changed, or the big thing that made it special to Slugterra was the clashing, where you can cancel each other out if they're the same charge level. So there became like a little bit of strategy, a little bit of timing in that, the Dark Souls of puzzle matchers.
12 years on the App Store, Slugterra Slug It Out was taken down, meaning new players couldn't download it anymore. But thankfully, if you downloaded it in the past, you can go into your app history and still download it. So today, in memory of the game,
Yeah, I think that's how I got it on my phone still, because I have a Apple device and it lets you do that, where if you had it, you can find the games that you've downloaded before and just re-download it, and the game should run. This wasn't like an online-only game. It did have some online events within it, but throughout the entirety of this game, at least, I remember we would try and have a way to let offline players always play. It might just mean that some of the special events don't show up. This game was originally only made for Apple devices, and we had to use a tool to port it over to Android when we decided to do Android instead of rebuilding it, because it was kind of like, we want to work on other projects. But that tool eventually got acquired by Google and then shut down because, the way Google does things. It eventually wasn't published anymore to Google because we couldn't make any updates. because the tool became too old and wasn't getting any more updates itself that we couldn't build it anymore. Similarly, probably same situation happened maybe with Apple. I don't know. It was after my time when it got pulled, but I'm sure there was any updates happening to that game were just because the App Store required an update, and maybe there was finally an update that required too much work, so they didn't bother doing pushing it back onto the store. But yeah, if you did have it on an Apple device, you should be able to download it if you had it before.
Be 100%ing it, playing through all 17 chapters, obtaining a 3-star on every single level, getting all 24 achievements, and lastly, taking down the heinous Dr. Black. Oh, and quickly, about 89% of people who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed, so if you end up enjoying the video, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always
Subscribe
change
to
your
me
mind.
too.
Okay, that's enough introductions. Let's begin. The game first starts on chapter 1 named Training, where we see a small little picture cutscene of Eli Shane dropping down into the underground and running into a cave troll named Cord. If you've seen the show, you know that Cord is one of our friends, so he teaches us how to play the game. Where then a tile grid appears below showing us that we're supposed to move around the different symbols. And matching the same symbol 3 in a row has a special effect, which I'll explain all the different ones once we get later into the game. But for now, you're just seeing me match the blaster shots, which are the most basic of attacks in the game. And you'll see later on in the game that these blaster shots are basically useless and we stop using them almost immediately. But for the purpose of the tutorial, we
I
kept
wouldn't say
matching them until
entirely
finally
useless.
that level ended and we entered the healing tutorial, where first
I believe with the blasters, you can change what your character skin is, and the attack speed was tied to what the animation was. So if there was any characters that had faster animations for their attack speed, they would shoot quicker. And I think with some characters you could stun lock if you could keep getting blaster matches, which you would usually use like the Enigmo Slug or something that like caused the board to refresh and then make automatic matches because it was just a new state. And if you got a chain of them, it would kind of stun lock them.
the grid got a little bit bigger as we were more experienced, but more importantly, if you look at the top, you'll see those 2 green bars, and those indicate my health on the left and the opponent's health on the right, which this tutorial is specifically for that, because if you match the green healing tiles together, your character heals a little bit. And after healing a couple more times, that was the end of that tutorial, and we entered the Slugslinger tutorial, which is definitely the most important tutorial, because first, if you look to the left, you'll see that I have Burpee in my slot, and Burpee, if you're unfamiliar, is a rare slug from the show, which is technically an Infernus slug, one of the most powerful ones in the show and in the game, and we're given it right off the bat. And combining enough of his tiles, you can get a charge up shot for Burpee and then launch it at your opponent, which for now I could only charge it up 1 level as I hadn't leveled it up, so the Burpee we're seeing being shot is its lowest form. But if you look at its slots, you'll see that there's 2 locked ones, so it becomes much more powerful when we unlock those. And now, since we'd completed the tutorials, it was time to face our first.
Yeah, we tried to make the tutorial as fast as possible. There was a time where there wasn't a tutorial, and that was like I mean, even before release, and people would get pretty confused. And it could be because like it was their first time playing a game like this. But like when you're presented with a few slug abilities, the blasters and healing, like the healing made sense. I think even the blasters made sense. But it was like the special abilities that confused people. I remember someone had said like, for the taser, if you have taserling equipped, you'll have like lightning bolt things for his charge up. And so when they were matching those, and he was asked like, "Well, what do you think happened when you charge the lightning bolts?" And it's like, "Oh, when you do that, like you attack quicker." And it's like that's not what happens at all. So it's like, yeah, we had to add like try to do it really quickly, but had like a quick little. Here's how you match stuff. These are blasters. This is healing. This is shooting ability. From that point on, it's kind of like, all right, good luck. Hopefully you figure it out, which I think is a pretty good approach.
Opponent Pronto, another character in the show who is supposed to be our friend. Though entering the battle, I realized that Pronto didn't actually have any slugs and only the normal blaster shots deal damage to us. So combining enough fire symbols and firing Burpee at Pronto, I was eventually able to take him down completely. And for defeating him, Pronto actually gave us one of his slugs, which is the poison slug named the Flatular Hincus. A pretty difficult name to say, so I'm just going to say poison slug from now on. But more important,
I hated having to spell out that name whenever we were like doing stuff in the code with him. A ridiculous name.
I pressed the Get It Now button and entered the shop, which if you look at the top right, you'll see that I had coins, so I was able to buy it using 100 of them. And it was time to test them out and chat.
A time before having premium and soft currency. All there was coins. And all you could buy is stuff with coins. More slugs.
Chapter 2 named The Tournament, which consisted of a bunch more battles than Chapter 1 did, so I knew it was definitely going to be tough. And pressing on the first level, we get sent into this picture
I
cutscene
miss
where we
these
see a bunch of
cutscenes.
different slug slingers battling, but most importantly, we see the guy standing up top named John Bull, and he would be the final boss of this chapter that we'd have to take down. But for now, our opponent was a guy named Flame, and his name was Flame because he had a singular fire slug, kind of similar to our Infernus slug, but definitely different. And if you look at Flame's character, you'll see that he got hit by my poison slug and was taking tick damage over time. And since this was one of the first battles and he only had one slug, we were able to
Wait a second.
And since this was, you'll see that he got hit by my poison slug. Now our opponent was a guy named Flame, and his name was Flame because he had a singular fire slug, kind of similar to our
Oh,
Infernus slug,
he said
but
fire
definitely
slug.
different. And if you
Yeah.
look at Flame's character,
Wasn't sure if he said Infernus slug. I'm like, no, that's a Flarengo. For whatever reason, we have very similar.
you'll see
The
that he got
balance of
hit by my
Slugterra was
poison
all over the
slug and was
place.
taking tick damage over time. And since this was one of the first battles and he only had one slug, we were able to take him down in 58 seconds without losing any health of our own. And that 58 seconds is important because getting under a minute in this level meant that we got all 3 stars. And also, if you look up top, you'll see that we got our very first achievement, which I'm not sure exactly what it was because the description doesn't really tell us, but I'm gonna assume it was just using the poison slug. But moving on, our next level was named Catch Cold, and our goal was to beat it in under a minute and 30 seconds to get the full 3 stars against an opponent named Frost who only had the ice slug. And specifically speaking, for our benefit, the fire slug from that last level we didn't really need, but I did remember that the ice slug from this game is pretty overpowered and would be very helpful
Very
if
true.
we got it. Which thankfully, after defeating Frost in a minute and 24 seconds, we actually ended up unlocking the ice slug named the Frost Crawler. So I immediately went to the shop, buying it and adding it to my team. And before
Never
I could
take it
actually
out.
move into the 3rd level, there's one important thing that I have to mention, and it's this. Every time I log out of the game and log back in, for some reason the game just decides to give you 9,000 coins. And there's literally no way that I can stop this. And like I mentioned, it happens every time you log back into the game. So it is just an infinite coin glitch. And at first I
That's hilarious. That's probably like some artifact from having some sort of online event that gives players the 3,000 coins, like something that was triggered by us to do. And then now that those servers are all shut down, it just automatically, like however it was programmed, it just automatically does it instead of not doing it, which is kind of funny. So yeah, enjoy.
didn't know this, so I thought this was just supposed to happen. So I ended up using the 9,000 coins to upgrade all of my slugs to max level, which isn't too crazy because the cost on them isn't too high. But my main reason for mentioning this is that at some points in the video, you're going to see an insane amount of coins on the top right. So just know that I tried my best not to abuse this glitch and play the game as normally as possible. But at times it did get difficult to keep track of how many coins I was actually earning. So there is a good chance that I did end up using more coins than I actually earned. But that aside, I entered the battle against Trixie, another
I wonder if it would still happen if you're in like airplane mode. Like if you were not connected to the internet, if it would handle it differently than if you were connected to the internet and it's unable to reach the server. It's just, it seems like it's a funny fallback, but that thing was added when I was like no longer working on that project and moved on to other stuff. So I don't know how that was specifically set up.
friend of Eli Shane's from the show. This time my slugs were much more powerful and they were fully charged right off the bat in their max forms, so I instantly took down Trixie. And the reason that they were fully charged there was because I used this upgrade which costs 1,000 coins each time that you want to use it, and it just fully charges your slugs right off the bat. But before I explain the upgrades a little more, we actually got our second achievement, which was for using the ice slug for the first time. But back to the upgrades, or boosters as they call it in this game. There's 4 different ones, and the best ones are the ones that cost 500 and 1,000 coins. The ones that affect the blaster damage and blaster speed aren't really that good. And I'm not gonna lie, as this game literally has hundreds of levels, spending 1,000 coins or even 500 for a level isn't really worth it. The only time that it would actually make sense to use one is against like a boss. But getting back to the battles, this time with no booster, we went up against this guy named Shockwire who had 2 taserling slugs. The taserling is basically a slug when it hits.
And for whatever reason, we made it so you can never have duplicates. I mean, one of it was because having abilities like frost crawlers would just be totally broken if you had multiple ones. but we very early teased that duplicates could happen, but only bad guys get
Hits your
duplicates.
opponent or it hits you, it shocks you, making you unable to move for a little bit, meaning you can't fire any slugs when you're shocked. And after defeating Shockwire and telling him that he needs to replace his batteries, we unlocked Taserling for ourselves, which was the 4th slug that we added into our collection. And you might have noticed there that that 4th slot was our last empty slot for a slug, meaning that each battle we can only bring in 4 slugs from our arsenal. Oh, and this is also the full size of the grid tiles, which was getting bigger and bigger each time we added a slug. And there's actually a lot more I need to explain about the actual slug combat in the game, but for this level, I'll just take the time to explain what the Frost Crawler slug does. And if you look up top, you'll see that as soon as I fire it, I created an ice wall right by Eli Shane, and as soon as the slug hit the opponent froze. And that's exactly what makes it pretty overpowered because it has 2 different effects, which is insanely rare for a slug. It basically creates an ice wall that can block any slug that's approaching from the opponent's side, and if it happens to connect with the opponent, it freezes them. But of course, it does.
Part of this was because when this game was released, we released with, I believe it was 8 slugs in the entire game. So at this point, you would have had half of your slugs. You wouldn't get 3,000 coins, so they wouldn't all be maxed out. They'd all be like level 2 and level 1. But like because of that, each one had its own specific spin. And so it's like Infernus slash Burpee just did heavy damage. Then Flatroller Incus would do damage over time. And I think it drained the energy as well. I don't know if that stayed in or not. I can't remember. Then yeah, Frost Crawler would make a frost wall because we wanted a way to give players that are a bit more defensive and don't want to have to keep timing counters a way to just put a wall up. So it was like a combination of that and freezing the opponent. And I think I can't remember if it stayed in. When a player is frozen, they take half damage. Um, so there was a little bit of a debuff to that. I don't know if that stayed in. And then Taserling just stunned them as well, or just flat out they couldn't attack when they got stunned, and it didn't affect what the damage was. So much balance and changes would always happen for how long any of these things last. I remember some of them lasted a long time initially because it was the player doing it to a computer, so it was fine. Later we added multiplayer, so we had to rebalance. And certain slugs like Frostcrawler and probably some other ones, there are versions that only enemies have to change the balance because sometimes it would just feel real bad to be unable to attack for like 10 seconds.
Come with one downside, which I will explain in a different battle. Because after defeating this opponent named the King of Sling, I noticed in the main menu that there was a mode named the multiplayer, and you could actually look for real opponents to play against, which I did try to do, but as this game isn't really downloadable.
I have no idea if it still works. Multiplayer was something we added and we were using Game Center, so it was like a only on Apple. And when Apple devices started getting like 64-bit versions, then there was a bug when a 32-bit and a 64-bit tried to connect. It wasn't handled gracefully because like we just didn't account for any of that because this game was super old. But if you have the same device and Game Center wanted to work, it should still technically work. I don't know if Game Center works or not. But I remember doing like little tournaments in the office. I was the champ, having to have tested this out so many times when playing it because I'd be creating different slugs and like their effects and board state stuff, or I was just trying to see what felt good, and I'd usually just play a bunch, but I'd play it in not well, I guess it's an emulator, but like our dev emulator thing, so I could play it on my workstation. And that thing was so slow. It was playing at like 10 frames per second, and with a mouse. So it was just like playing it with those weird handicaps of being like super slow and unresponsive, made it so it was just like I became an expert at it when it became time to play it for real, where I'm like, wow, this feels butterly smooth now.
anymore, and I'm pretty sure no one really plays it. I couldn't find anyone to face off with, so I just went back into the normal
I have two
battles, but
similar
it was
devices.
pretty
I could
cool to
test
see
that out
that this
later.
game had a multiplayer mode, because I'd completely forgotten about it. But now, as the next several battles don't really have much going on in them, this would be a good time to explain the slug combat in the game. And basically, like I've already mentioned, each slug has 3 different tiers to it, being the first tier, second tier, and third tier. And let's say 2 tier 1 slugs collide against each other, they basically cancel each other out, meaning there's no special effects or abilities that take place. But now let's say I fire a level 2 slug and Pronto fired a level 1 slug. My level 2 slug would just completely overpower it and just run through the level 1 slug. And eventually the level 2 would make it to Pronto. And that's exactly why you see me always saving up until my slugs are fully charged to actually fire them. Because let's say I fired a level 1 slug or even a level 2 slug and my opponent fired a level 3 slug in return, it would completely just cancel out my slugs, but then the opponent's slug would actually get its ability off on my character. And this explanation of how the slugs at different levels interact actually ties into the weakness of the ice slug. Since it has the 2 different abilities, the tier that you fire the ice slug at is actually counted 1 less. So for example, a tier
Initially, that wasn't even true. That came later. I don't remember if like this change happened before we released, but when it was first created, it just did the same thing and had a nice well. We're like, this is broken.
Tier 3 Ice Slug would lose to any other Tier 3 fired by the opponent, and if they fire a Tier 2 Slug, it would tie against it, canceling each other out. But we don't really actually care about that weakness, and I'll explain why later on. And also, I hope my explanation of the battling made sense, but if it didn't, to put it more
Also, the little blaster shots, those are considered tier 0. And they were at some point possibly going to be floppers, if you know Slugterra lore, but it never happened. I think there was actually a branding thing where they just didn't want them to be that, or maybe it was too noisy having small slugs that basically did nothing.
simply, the bigger your slug is, the more powerful it is. And our goal is to always fully charge a slug before we fire it, with a couple of exceptions, but you'll see that later on when I actually started to implement different strategies. Because for now, I only had the 4 slugs that the game gave me and was just spamming them over and over again. And eventually, after defeating a couple more opponents in this tournament, I unlocked the Arachnid slug, which just by its name, you could probably tell that it's like a spider slug. And as we'd actually made it to level 9 of chapter 2, it was actually a bonus round. And the bonus round are actually pretty cool because you can actually charge up your slugs, and it more so just depends on how many of the same symbol that you can combine, dictating how strong your slugs are. Oh, and we don't really have a choice in when we fire the slugs. They kind of just insta fire as soon as we combine the symbols. And most importantly, our opponent can't deal damage, and it's basically just like a tank that we're supposed to slowly dwindle down. And thankfully I was able to do it fast enough to get the 3 stars. But now to
Yeah, those were kind of inspired by in Street Fighter when there'd be bonus rounds where you're beating up like a car or something.
explain something more about the combat, and this part mainly just focuses on the grid tile and sort of what I mentioned on that last level, which if you combine a bigger stack of the same symbol, your slug actually gets a bigger charge. And the number of the same symbol that you can combine at once range from 3 to 5. 3 gives you a little bit of charge, 4 gives you a pretty
If you kind of line up how stuff falls, you could get like 6 or I mean technically 7, but 7's like pretty hard. 6 you could. I can't remember if it actually would read it as 6 or if it would read it as a bunch of threes. But like you could do like a 6, but it's weirder. Where like a 5's pretty much guaranteed 'cause you need 2 and then you put in a 1.
decent amount of charge, and 5 gives you a full bar of charge. So you'll notice that most of the time I'm usually just going for 4 or 5, because for some reason going for 3 is kind of atrocious. And since our goal is always to defeat the level as quick as possible, our best path to meeting that goal is always going for the 5 symbol combinations, which in this game are actually much easier than in normal combination games, because in normal games if you move a symbol around and it doesn't create a combination, the symbol gets reset to its original spot. But in this game, you could actually move a singular symbol across the entire grid tile without it resetting. So you can
You're welcome. I did that.
just create a combination wherever you like. And it's more so about pathing the fastest possible route to getting a 5 combination. And again, if none of that made sense at all, it's not too big of a deal. But basically, the goal is always to try and get the biggest symbol combinations possible.
Yeah, basically I think what he's saying is like because you can move them without making matches, like if you want, say, to make a 4 match, you could just move this one over here and it would let you, and then you move this over there and then make the match. So you can actually kind of housekeep and quickly make better matches instead of just doing a 3 match here, you could put that there and make it a 4 match. Or you could move this down and this over to make a 5 match.
Because it directly correlates to more damage. And looking back at the game, we had just now defeated an enemy named Boone the Goon, a name whose meaning has changed a lot in the past couple of years, but most importantly, after defeating him, it was now
A goon used to just be like a henchman. Gooning was not a term back then.
time to fight the boss of this chapter, named John Bull, who very weirdly tells us that his employer wants us out of the way. Also mentioning that we have a lot to learn about this place and that he's going to be our first teacher. And I'm not gonna lie, this was actually one of the first battles that I almost lost, as about a minute in, my health had dwindled down to about 20%. But this was mainly due to the reason that I hadn't fired any of my slugs and was just waiting until they're fully charged up. So as soon as I fired all of them at once and they started making contact with John Bull, his health was immediately blitzed down, and his losing words were that we might have won the tournament, but we had no idea what was coming our way. But looking past that, we'd won the tournament, completing chapter 2, getting our 3rd achievement of defeating John Bull alongside our 4th achievement, which was using Burpee against John Bull as well. But the most important part was unlocking the slug named Fandango, and this slug alongside Burpee and Frostcrawler is one.
It's so strange. I guess maybe it was an update that broke it, or maybe it's just weird luck. But originally, when you got a new slug, it was spinning around and then would stop on the one. I remember fiddling with that. But I guess at some point maybe it broke or they stopped doing it. I don't know.
That carries me throughout most of the game, and basically its ability is as it flies through the air, it charges all of your other slugs, and I'll explain why that's good a little later on. But for now, even though we
Also, when this game first came out, you didn't even buy the first, you didn't. Could you buy any of the slugs? You didn't buy the first ones. We just gave them to you. And it had like an unlock sequence of you getting it, rather than what it's doing right now. But I think like after a while, like the loop of like how to get more slugs became confusing. So it all follows the same loop now.
unlocked chapter 3, there was actually 2 levels in chapter 2 that we didn't get a full 3-star on. So of course I went back and got those, and then finally entered chapter 3 where we first see Trixie get kidnapped by the Hula Gang. So our goal in this chapter is to get her back. First fighting Billy, who gets taken down pretty easily, but then there is the second level where we have to go up against 3 opponents. And these multi-opponent levels are usually the ones that are a little scary for getting the full 3 stars on, because even though you are given more time, you at some point combine so many tiles within the level that you start getting confused. So in a way it just becomes an endurance test. But this time we were way over the mark and we got the 3-star with a full minute remaining. Our next opponent was Boone the Goon, another battle that wasn't too difficult, but I mentioned him again because you might have noticed that I'm fighting some of the same opponents over and over again, and that's just something you'll see throughout the entire game where a bunch of opponents reappear. And the next important opponent for the Hula Gang chapter is Broken Glasses, or just to say her name, Glasses. And Glasses wasn't difficult or anything to take down, but for some reason after beating her we actually get another achievement and unlock the Enigma Slug, who in theory sounds pretty cool, kind of like the Fandango, because as it flies through the air it matches tiles for you. But when I actually put it into use, I realized that whenever it matches the tiles for you it becomes pretty confusing, because most of the time when you're actually playing the game you're always trying to think a few steps ahead, since you want to be constantly matching the tiles, not wasting any time. But when the slug starts matching the tiles and converting them into different ones, it sort of throws off all of your steps that you had in your mind. So I was pretty
Yeah, if I remember correctly, having Enigma, it's good to have Enigma with Fandango because both of them effectively are causing energy to go up. Fandango, when he gets fired, causes all your other ones to go up, and Enigma makes random combinations of stuff, like adds craziness to the board and causes matches to happen. You usually are like, you have like a good slug to work with, and you're just trying to charge as fast as possible. So maybe you have like Doc and like a ghoul one or something, like something else, and you're just firing the other two to just cause a bunch of stuff to go on. You're not really, the strategy is to just fire this guy, whoever this guy is. And like with Enigmas, like you get like sometimes it randomly makes a bunch of these, so you're just unlocking them. Sometimes you get a bunch of healing, like it's just totally random. So yeah, it's you can't really pre-plan. It's more like the planning was what your four slugs are, and you're just trusting that firing them in any order is fine.
Pretty quick to get rid of them, replacing them with the Arachnid slug. And the Arachnid for now was sort of just a filler one because there was a specific slug that I was waiting for, but we'd unlock that one way later on. And for now, we'd basically made it to the end of this chapter as there was a bonus round of a cage that we had to fight. And this cage, as you saw in the cutscene, contained Trixie, and after taking it down, Trixie was freed. But this chapter actually
Huzzah.
consisted of one more level, named the Chain of Command. And this one was interesting because it had a picture cutscene containing a Gould and Furnace. And if you're unfamiliar with the Gould slugs, they're basically evil forms of the normal slugs, though I should mention that they're not
When we first made this, we weren't allowed to give the good guys ghouls. Only the bad guys can have ghouls. And we're like, are you crazy? They're gonna want to have the ghouls. And in the storyline, I think ghouls were bad only. And I think at some point they made it so like I think they were in like the area where ghouling happens. I haven't seen the show in forever. Um, the like Darkbane stuff. I think Burpee like volunteers to be ghouled because you need to be ghouled to get out or something like that. So like eventually the story even just made it so ghouling's fine. Or at least at some points. But yeah, like I remember we gave the bad guys ghouls first, and then we had to like negotiate to eventually give the good guys ghouls.
originally ghouls, but they're actually transformed into ghouls by Dr. Black. And the ghouls are kind of the entire scheme that Dr. Black uses in order to try and take over Slugterra. And a little bit more of a lore drop if you're unfamiliar with Slugterra. If you remember, I mentioned at the start of the game, Eli Shane had dropped to the underground, and the underground is basically where the Slugterra stuff happens. It's sort of this hidden area separate from the real world, and everyone above ground actually has no idea that all of this is going on underground. And Eli Shane was actually the same way for the most part until one day randomly Burpee landed in his room, sort of as a message from his dad, who was actually in the underground and apparently had been captured by the dark forces, shooting Burpee out as a last resort to Eli. All of that's much better explained in the show, so I'd recommend watching it. And for now, after defeating Lock and Load in the last level of chapter 3, we unlocked our 6th achievement of 24, and we unlocked the Boondock Slug, which is a slug that's very important in the lore of the show, but it kind of sucks in the game, so I don't end up using it, except towards the very end where I need it to unlock a couple of achievements. But for now, I needed to go back and get some more 3 stars. And I haven't mentioned this, but for levels that have multiple opponents, it's actually better to use this 500 coin booster. And this booster is named the Slug Auto Charger, which if you look to the left, you'll see that the bar of the slug slowly increases over time, even if I'm not matching anything. And compared to the booster that auto charges your slugs at the very beginning, this one is much more handy in the battles that end up taking way longer. And this allowed me to get my 3-star against Lock and Load, unlocking chapter 4 through the flame.
Yeah, correct. That is sort of what the intent was, where it's just like the a quick like beat this level for me one is the 1,000 coin one that gives everything max charged. And then the 500 ones like make this easier for me. And so when you have multiple things, making it easier is actually probably the better route because making the first round beatable immediately doesn't really help you with the second one.
In which at first our opponent is the Shadow Clan, and I remember from the show that these guys used to be extremely scary, and instead of using blasters like everyone else, they would use their
If I recall correctly, they were the good guys.
tails as their launchers. But again, all of that's sort of irrelevant for the game. And like normal, I was able to destroy him pretty easily. Our next fight was named a rematch, and it was against John Bull, but we weren't even worried about him and more worried about this Nacho character that was ghouling slugs, and we needed to find him. And John Bull didn't really seem to get any stronger than last time because he was taken out pretty easily. We also had a random fight against a turret. It wasn't even a real human, but I mention it because after defeating the turret, we unlocked the Granuke slug. And this slug, when you fire it, it basically puts these bombs on the opponent's tile grid, which that mainly only would affect people if you played on multiplayer. Since the computer opponents technically don't have a tile grid, they kind of just take extra damage over time. And for now, I chose to
Correct. We had to make two different things. Anything that affects the board for the opponent, we have to just kind of fake doing something. It's kind of annoying, but like they don't have a board. That is true. But stuff like Granuke is really fun to use in multiplayer.
replace my arachnate with the Granook because it seemed like it would do more damage. But more importantly, this was also when I took a look at all the different types of slugs that were in the game, like these double combo ones that cost 6,000 coins to unlock, but they seemed to do a lot more damage and had a lot better abilities. There was also the ghoul slugs that we had access to.
Yeah, those looked like they were the fusions, and these are the ghouls. These all came in updates later on, as time went on. I think when the game was first released, it was just the first 5 chapters, maybe even less. Hard to remember what was like the immediate release and then what was updates, because yeah, the game kept getting updated over time.
But these guys cost 7,000 coins, and the ghoul slugs in a way are stronger than their normal versions, but they also deal damage to yourself. And for the most part, I don't really use these guys, but there is a section later on in the game that forces us to use them. And when we get there, you'll see exactly why I actually don't like using them. And it's a reason that might be a little unexpected. But moving on from the ghoul slugs, there was also the megamorph slugs. And the megamorph slugs are basically just better versions of the normal and the ghoul slugs. And the main one we really wanted was the megamorph Infernus. But I'm just gonna spoil it.
It's funny that some of them you can just get right now, and it's like some unlocked through story, and it's just like that moment in the story is when the update would have been. So it's like you shouldn't really have any access to this, but you know, we needed ways to get people to play the game, and when we show them all this content at the beginning. Sure.
That guy we literally don't get until the very end of the game. But now, as we made it decently far, I should explain what my
I think I might have been like one of the last updates was probably adding the megamorphs.
strategy was that I came up with, and why specifically I was using Infernus, Frostcrawler, and the Fandango Slug. And it was actually pretty simple. The Fandango Slug existed to charge up the Frostcrawler and the Infernus Slug specifically. And the Frostcrawler, you'll see that I rarely even let it charge up to full and always fire it when it's at one level of charge. And that's because that one level of charge is enough to tank a tier 3 slug. And firing the Frostcrawler immediately prevents me from a ton of damage from any slug or any type of blaster shot that's coming my way. And lastly, Burpee was just my main damage dealer. There wasn't really any other
Oh yeah, when you freeze them, I think their charging stops as well. So I think when you're frozen, you have like blocks and stuff in the way.
slug that I had at the time that dealt more damage. So in short, Burpee was the main damage dealer, the Frostcrawler was the shield, and the Fandango was basically a booster to those two. And for the fourth slot, though I didn't have the right slug yet, it was already reserved because I remembered this one specific slug being extremely strong when I first played the game. Oh, and I stopped on this level specifically because after defeating the Delta Operator, we got another achievement. And I believe the achievement was just not letting the ice slug of the soldier hit me. But as I continued making it through the levels, I was starting to realize that all of them started to have the ghoul slugs, so the difficulty was definitely rising. And after defeating this opponent named Mr. Saturday, which reminded me of One Piece, if you know, you know, we'd finally made it to that Nacho character that we'd heard about earlier, and we literally saw him in the act of creating the stuff that was making the ghouls. So we called him a monster and told him he'd never corrupt another slug, and he agreed with us that he was a monster, but then he also called us a child, saying that this would be an easy win for him. But I'm not gonna lie, we kind of just decimated him, unlocking the achievement for defeating him. But if you remember, I mentioned that the Boondock Slug was important for the lore, and we actually get to see a glimpse of that here where Eli shoots a Boondock Slug against another Gold Slug, which somehow turns the Gold Slug back to normal. But then in the background, we also see Nacho running away, which seemed to be a very reoccurring thing where the characters would just run away and then we'd fight him again in the future. And as there's one more level to face in this
Just like any good Saturday morning cartoon.
chapter, which was a bonus round, basically destroying the ghoulifying machine, we go into a cutscene where we see this shadowy figure. And unlocking the next chapter, by the picture on the front, we could tell that the shadowy figure was Dr. Black. But before taking him on, we actually still needed
You're 20 minutes in and you're only at chapter
to
5.
get 3 stars for chapter 4, and eventually I was able to do so, obtaining all 33 stars for chapter 4 and entering chapter 5 named Black.
Yeah, chapter 5, I think that was the first like real chunk of content we did, was like 1 through 5 was like what the game was initially, that plus endless mode plus multiplayer, and then a new chapter every few months, year, whatever, just depends. if there was hunger for it.
Water. And within the first few fights, we unlocked a new slug, which I don't end up ever using, but more importantly, after one of the
Rude.
fights, we unlocked another achievement, and it's basically just not being hit within a level. And for the most part, again, we just saw some previous enemies.
That slug was Mako Breaker, which was one of the ones that I remember making where as he eats up other slugs or even these blaster shots, his attack will do more damage. So if he shoots a bunch of stuff and then you counter with Mako Breaker and eat all of it up, he'll do more damage.
That we'd already fought in the
And he's
past,
like a
but of
shark.
course this time with gold slugs provided by Dr. Black. We ran into Nacho again, who's still using the gold slugs as well. But if you look up top, you'll notice a very big red slug approaching Nacho, and that guy is named the Ramstone Slug. And he's basically the last piece of the puzzle that I wanted on my team, because its ability is basically acting as two fully powered slugs. So let's say there's a level 3 slug approaching it, it'll literally make that slug vanish but keep on going itself. And on top of that, it deals a pretty decent amount of damage. The combo you want to be using is blasting the fully powered Ramstone and then the Infernus right behind it, which basically ensures that the Infernus always makes it to the opponent, and the Ramstone sort of acts as a shield for it. And with this strategy, I was ready to take on Dr. Black, who as I was about to go into battle with, I saw that for the 3 stars I had a 4-minute time. So I knew that this level was definitely going to be difficult because that was the longest amount of time we'd been given. And honestly, it did seem pretty difficult at first as Dr. Black wasn't going down easily, but eventually I did take him down at around 1:30. But this was when I realized why there's a 4-minute timer, because Dr. Black emerges again, this time much angrier and with one more extra slug. But I implemented the same strategy of just constantly using my ice walls and then fully charging up my Ramstone and Infernus and releasing them at any good opportunity I was given. And slowly but surely I was able to dwindle down the second phase of Dr. Black, eventually taking him down at 2 minutes and 59 seconds, giving us the achievement more like Black and Blue after we defeated Dr. Black. But just as we thought we defeated him, we see Dr. Black pull out his blaster and use an arachnid slug, which allows him to create a zipline out of his
Felicia.
webs, once again escaping like every other character. But on the bright side, chapter 5 had been completed with only 2 more stars that we needed to obtain, which we ended up getting pretty easily. And if you're curious why sometimes I don't get the full 3 stars, and most of the time it's just bad RNG with the symbols, but sometimes I'm just playing very slow. But that aside, we're now entering chapter 6 named Judgment Day, and from now on I'm going to be speeding up a little bit because we still had 11 more chapters to go in the game. But as far as the lore goes within the chapters, it's basically the same exact thing that we see in the first 5 chapters, where we defeat an opponent, they escape, and then we fight them again, and then we defeat them again, and then we fight them again. So basically I'm just going to be stopping at the cool parts, and our first stop is right here where I started looking through some of the gold slugs, and this one named Fotamo caught my eye because it was like a gold version of the Fandango, which provided me with extra energy for my other slugs. But its downside, since it is a ghoul, is that when it's flying through the air it drains your energy, but when it ends up hitting the opponent it gives you a huge burst. So it's like a double-edged sword. Oh, and if you look under the gold slug, you'll see that I bought a combo slug as well, and that combo slug was the combination between Fandango and a different water slug, again another energy provider. And at this point I wasn't really going for an overpowered setup, it was mostly just experimenting with different slugs and trying to see if there was anything better than what I was already using. And these guys were decent, but they weren't as good as my original combo. I'd also unlocked the Megamorph Frost Crawler, so I ended up buying it, but I quickly realized that this was a mistake and the normal Frost Crawler is actually better, mainly because the Megamorph slugs and the combo slugs only have 1 charge bar, so you don't get a level 1 or a 2, but you just get straight to level 3, and it still
Yeah.
takes the same amount of energy to
Yeah, you can't beat the original Frostcrawler. He's just broken. After a while, we're just like, that's just if you need to have a shield, then there you go. And then if you don't need a shield, then you sub him out. But the rules that was added for what a Megamorph is wasn't really super compatible with making him feel any better than the original Frostcrawler.
charge up to there. And if you remember, we'd always spam the Frost Crawler at level 1 or 2, so that made my defensive properties much worse, and I quickly went back to the normal Frost Crawler, and I replaced the Ghoul with the normal Fandango. But as I still wanted to test out new slugs, I bought the Megamorph Taserling and replaced it with the Ramstone. Oh, and at this point, I'd also realized that my normal strategy was so good that I could probably beat the entire game with it, and since I wanted to use all the different slugs, I actually ended up using
If I recall correctly, I think Megamorph can't be countered except for by another Megamorph. I think it's effectively like a level 4. That's what it's like in Slug It Out too. I don't remember because like I wasn't on the project anymore when they start adding megamorphs to the game.
The glitched coins at this point. And the only reason to this was because I was getting kind of bored using the same things over and over again. Oh, and we make a little stop here at Captain Malvolio Drake, which is a 3-part fight. But after defeating the third opponent, Malvolio Drake, we unlocked the achievement for defeating Drake and stealing his treasure. Oh, and we also unlocked the Flaringo, which was that fire slug that we saw at the very beginning. Our next stop is a fight against Sedo, another mole like Pronto, but this time Sedo is on a machine, so he's named Mecha Mole. And after defeating him, we got an achievement. I also bought the Megamorph Poison Slug and the Megamorph Arachnid at some point, putting them on
You should not have all of these coins.
my team and testing them out. And again, it was decent since they were Megamorph, but it wasn't the best setup I've had. It's just that most slugs lack the defensive properties that the Ice Slug has. But that aside, we make our next stop in this sort of weird area that kind of caught me off guard because there was a level named a long time ago, and for some reason in it we play as Will Shane, Eli Shane's father, against a young Dr. Black. We do of course pretty easily beat him, but then out of nowhere we go back to Eli Shane in the very next level. And I really never understood what happened there, but it was a cool little backstory level. And our next stop is this bonus level, and I stopped here because after defeating it we unlocked ghoul slugs, which did confuse me a little bit because I thought we already had them unlocked, but I guess this just unlocked a bunch more for me. And this was all
Yeah, it was like when ghouls first got added, they got added when this update, like the update that had this chapter came out, and it only gave you the first four, like Infernus, Frostcrawler, Taserling, and Fletcherlinks, I think. So it unlocked those for you, and I think in this chapter you can only use ghouls. I think that's what was done.
also the part
Because in the show, that's sort of how it works. Ghouls only worked in this area.
that I mentioned earlier where the game forces me to use the ghoul slugs, which should be a good thing since they are more powerful, but for some reason the darker colors of the symbols of the ghoul slugs just made it way more difficult on me to combine them. Like I genuinely couldn't understand why the colors made such a big difference, but for some reason they did, and I just wasn't performing as well as I was before, especially on this one level where we first have to fight a Darkbane Elite 1, and then after taking him down there's also a Darkbane Elite 2. And the thing about this level is that in order to get 3 stars, we have to beat it in 1 minute and 45 seconds, which was seeming like an impossible task for me because even using the boosters, I literally couldn't seem to get under 145. I couldn't even get under 215 to get the 2nd star. But thankfully, after many attempts and the use of the 500 coin slug auto charger, I eventually got the 3 stars, but it was extremely close because the elite still had half of his health at 140, but then exactly at 145 I somehow defeated him, getting the 3 stars that I needed. And that right there was probably the most difficult level in the entire game. It genuinely just gets easier after this. I did have a little scare in a later chapter where we ran into them again and it was still ghouls only, and even the timer of 145 for the 3 stars is the same, but for some reason this time we defeated them a lot easier at 1 minute and 24 seconds. And as far as the lore goes, after defeating this chapter, all of the ghouls turned back into normal, or at least our slugs that had turned into ghouls, meaning I could finally use my normal slugs if I wanted to. We also again had another fight with Dr. Black, but this wouldn't be the last we see of him. There was even a part where we fought our dad, and after
So the stuff, it's just funny seeing the game have everything kind of available all at the beginning when like this stuff was stuff that came out over the course of years. And so it's like this was kind of added, like here's some new content, here's some new stuff. And it's like having the fusion and stuff like
decimating
available.
him, he told us he was proud of us. But these last 2 fights against Dr. Black and his dad were all just in a dream. There was also this chapter named Long Ago where we got to play as a younger Dr. Black, and it basically just shows his journey fighting different slug slingers, and then him finding a portal to an even deeper underground where he meets this demon named Brimstone that shows him how the gold slugs are made. And after finding the power of the gold slugs, he went and fought Will Shin, defeating him and dropping him down into the home of the demons. And that was kind of the last of that as we went back to Eli Shane against Dr. Black once again. And after defeating him, this time Dr. Black went through that portal, and now an all-out war had started. So we defeated different types of Delta operators, Doom bots, Mr. Oranges, until eventually we made it to chapter 17, the last chapter of the entire game. And the fights before the end were of course characters we already expected like Nacho, and after defeating the second to last level, we finally unlocked Megamorph Infernus, meaning we could use it against our final battle against Dr. Black. Black. And for this fight, I brought in what I thought was my best team composition that I'd figured out, consisting of Megamorph Infernus, Frostcrawler, Megamorph Taserling, and lastly Fandango. I would have liked bringing in the normal Infernus and the Ramstone Slug, but the Megamorph Taserling and the Megamorph Infernus just do too much damage. And you can see here what I mean, because even without any boosters, what was supposed to be the last boss, an angry Dr. Black, ended up looking like any other fight that we had gone through, kind of getting just absolutely destroyed, leaving us with one last bonus mission to destroy everything. Oh, and there is a strategy for the bonus missions, and basically you want to bring in the slugs that only have that one charge thing, because it doesn't matter if you combine 3, 4, or 5 symbols, it always shoots the highest power one.
That's
Since that's the
funny.
only one it can technically
Probably an
shoot. All that
oversight on our
aside,
part.
victory was now ours, and the team kind of just looked off into the sunset, which doesn't really make sense since we're underground. But we weren't completely finished yet either, since we'd only unlocked 12 out of the
There is a bunch of glowing slugs on the top of caverns that act like a sunset. Makes perfect sense.
24 achievements, so now it was time to hunt for the last 12. The 13th achievement was unlocked by defeating Cord in Chapter 2 by not using the normal blaster shot, and the 14th achievement was in the same exact level where we used a specific set of slugs. The 15th achievement we should have unlocked way earlier, but I think the game bugged out, so we decided to replay a level and we got it. The 16th achievement was
Probably.
letting this guy hit us one time and then defeating him right after, but after this was where things got a little wonky, because I'd go for the achievements, but for some reason they just didn't register. And here, the achievement I was going for was that I had to get hit by the poison slug, the arachnid slug, the frost crawler slug, and lastly, the taserling slug. Basically, we just had to get all of the status effects on us in one level and then still end up winning the level. And this was easily done by using the boondock slug, because you can just heal yourself over time while they deal damage to you. But for some reason, this achievement just refused to pop up. The same thing happened for the 18th achievement, where we had to fire arachnid.
I wonder if it wanted all of those to be active at the same time. Like you are frozen and you are stunned and you are poisoned at the same time, not just in the same thing. Maybe it's been over like 10, 13, 14 years. So I don't remember the exact setup for that, but I do remember that achievement existing, but I don't remember the rules behind it. I think some of these achievements too were like designed to happen in multiplayer, even though they could happen out of it.
Boondock, Fandango, and Enigmo, specifically in the rematch level of Chapter 4. And using the booster, I fired all 4 of them immediately, but for some reason, I again didn't get the achievement. The same thing happened for my 19th achievement, where I had to fire Boondock on a specific level. The same thing happened for my 20th achievement, which was firing Boondock against Dr. Black. And I'm showing you guys all these just to kind of show that I went through the effort to try and get the achievements, but they weren't popping up. So I am going to technically count them, as there isn't really anything I can do. And there's actually one more achievement, the 21st one, which basically consists of me firing the Infernus, the Poison Slug, Arachnid, and Taserling against Dr. Black. And again, the achievement didn't pop up for some reason. And I thought that maybe the game was glitched, but then when I was going for the 22nd achievement of using the 4 slugs that I have in my arsenal, I actually ended up getting it this time, which basically told me that it was the specific achievements that were bugged and it wasn't really the game. But either way, the 23rd achievement was basically not letting this level hit me with the Granuk slug, which was very easily done with the help of a booster. The 24th and final achievement was defeating this zombified chef without using a normal blaster shot. And again, with the help of a booster, it was very easily obtained, and that had meant that I had 100%ed the game, getting every single star within every single level of each chapter, and of course, getting all 24 achievements, or at least the ones the game allowed me to get. And honestly, this game was pretty fun. A little repetitive at times, and even maybe a little easy, but it was definitely filled with lore, more so than most mobile games are, which makes it special in its own way. And let me know if you want me to play Slugterra Slug It Out too, because if I remember, that game's a lot more polished than this one, and that one's still available on the App Store. But okay, enough yapping from me. Bye bye.
Yeah, that was cool seeing all that. Maybe I should play that game again sometime. It's been far too long. I don't know if it's 100% beat. Did he unlock all of the skins? I guess you're just buying it with coins. I don't know if the Slug Seeker stuff works without the servers. And how far can you go in challenge mode? /endless. That's cool though. This is Stu in the future editing this video. If you liked what you just watched, maybe subscribe. Maybe I'll react to someone playing Slug It Out 2, or one of the other Slugterra games that I worked on at some point in time. Maybe give a comment. Tell me what your favorite slug is. If any of you pick the same one that's mine, I will heart it. I think I have his I have a toy of it somewhere hiding. I'll see if I can find that for whatever the next video is. All right.